Okay, so this is lesson 1 in the measurement unit, measuring and estimating metric lengths. So the metric system, or the SI system, is the standard system of measurement in most countries. It's based on powers of 10. So because our numbers are also base 10, it makes calculations a lot easier. So let's talk about length to start with. Really common units. So the base unit for length is meters, and then everything is based off of that. So millimeters are typically the smallest unit of length that you'll see in your everyday life. The prefix milli means that there are 1,000 millimeters in a meter. Okay. So if you wanted to write it as a meter, it'd be 0.001, so 1,000th of a meter. So really, really, really small. Centimeters are also really common. The word centi, prefix centi, refers to 100. So think about cent in, or per cent. That means 100, or cents, 100 cents in a dollar. That's a good way to remember it. So there's 100 centimeters in a millimeter, or in a meter. Okay. And then for longer lengths, we typically use kilometers. Kilo means 1,000. So there's 1,000 meters in a kilometer. Okay. Make sure you know how to measure with a ruler. You can practice doing these things. I can't do this on the screen, so I'm going to leave this part out. Although we don't always have a ruler with us, right, in real life. So if you want to estimate a length, a really good way to do that is using a benchmark or a referent. So it's something familiar. That we can use that can help us estimate. Let's go through some common reference for common lengths that we use a lot. Okay, using just like our body parts or things that like we do every day. So 1 millimeter is really, really, really small. So thickness of your fingernail is a good reference for that. 1 centimeter, width of pinky. So you can, it just depends on your hands, but you can test it out. Take a ruler, measure the width of your pinky. If it's about 1 centimeter, that's a really good reference to use. So I'm talking about that there. To measure 30 centimeters, which is about 1 foot, if you're using imperial units, I'll put a little squiggly. It's not exactly, it's about 1 foot. Your foot, again, depends on how big your feet are. But for the average person, use your foot to measure 30 centimeters approximately. Okay, 1 meter, which is about a yard, is 1 big step. So if you want to see a good example of people using this is referees in soccer or football. If they're measuring, if there's a free kick, you're supposed to stand 10 yards from the person who's kicking the ball. And the referee will often count 10 large steps. And so they're using a referent there to measure 10 yards or 10 meters. Okay, 100 meters, about the length of a soccer field if you add a bit to either end. Think also about a track, right? The 100-meter is the length of the track. The flat side, the longer side. Okay, and then 1 kilometer. A good reference for that is the distance you can walk in about 10 minutes if you're a reasonable walker. If you're a bit slower, maybe 12 minutes. Okay, but that's 1 kilometer. Okay, or you're taking 1,000 large steps. Okay, good. So try those out, see if they work for you. Okay, so let's estimate some lengths here. So estimate lengths using reference. For example, if the length of a book looks to be about half my foot, then it would be about 15 centimeters because I know my foot is about 30, right? So let's do each of these and then you can test them on your own to actually measure them. Thickness of a phone, maybe it depends on your phone, right? Maybe 5 millimeters, maybe 1 centimeter, It just depends on the phone and how thick your phone is. Maybe it's the width of your pinky. Maybe it's a little bit thinner than that. Height of a door. So if you can imagine yourself walking up the door, you might take 2 large steps, maybe about 2 meters, I would say is pretty good. And then the perimeter of a soccer field. So you're kind of going 100 meters, maybe 50, and then 100 again, and then maybe 50. Because remember we said the length of a soccer field is about 100, that's the longer side. So maybe about 300 meters, and it depends on the soccer field because every soccer field has slightly different lengths. Okay, converting between units. We often need to do this, and it's really easy, like I said earlier, because metric units are in base 10, we can just convert by either multiplying or dividing by 10. So this little chart here kind of shows the common lengths that we use: millimeter, centimeter, meter, and kilometer. And if you want to convert to smaller units, there are more of them, so we multiply by 10. And if you want to convert to larger units, those are bigger lengths, there's less of them, we would divide by 10. There are, in these blank spots here, there are other units, we just don't use them very much. So yeah. Okay, so let's convert here. And we're going to convert it to a more reasonable unit because you want to use a unit that our brain is understanding here. Our brain is not very good at understanding very small or very big numbers, so we want to convert it to something reasonable. So the length of an ant. You would never measure an ant and say it's 0.0032 meters. That's hard to understand. So instead, maybe we're going to measure this ant in millimeters, because I see that if I move the decimal place 3 times, or if I multiply it by 1,000, I'm going to have something more reasonable. So to get from meters to millimeters, we multiply by 10 3 times, or we multiply by 1,000. So we'll start with our length here, and then we're going to times it by 1,000. And we get 3.2 millimeters. That's a much better measurement. That's much easier to understand than 0.0032 meters. They mean the same thing, but better to use 3.2 millimeters. A pencil. Pencils, probably we would measure those in centimeters. So we're going to go to centimeters here. And so that means we are going to multiply by 100. Remember, there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So 0.078 meters times 100. And you'd get, so what that does essentially, so when you multiply, all it's doing is moving the decimal over however many spots when you multiply by powers of 10. So here, because 100 has 2 zeros, we're going to move that decimal place 2 spots. So it's going to be 7.8 meters. Oh, sorry, centimeters. This pencil is not 7.8 meters long, it's 7.8 centimeters long. Again, same thing as 0.078 meters, but you would never say a pencil is 0.078 meters long. You would use centimeters. Okay, let's go the opposite direction now. This sounds kind of silly, right? A hike is 750,000 centimeters long. You would never say that. You would probably measure a hike in kilometers. So let's look at our chart here. To get from centimeters to kilometers, I'm going to have to divide by 10 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. That means I'm going to divide by a 1 with 5 zeros. So 100,000. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I get 7.5 kilometers. That makes a lot more sense in our brains. The hike is 7.5 kilometers long. The width of a soccer field, we would never measure that in centimeters. We would probably measure that in meters. So remember, there's 100 centimeters in a meter, so we're going to divide by 100. So if you're going to larger units, you're going to divide. So that's going to be 60 meters. The soccer field is 60 meters long. That makes a lot more sense. The radius of a blood vessel. Blood vessels are very tiny, probably wouldn't measure that in centimeters. You'd probably measure that in millimeters. So we're going to multiply by 10. There's only 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So 0.78 centimeters times 10, 7.8 millimeters. The height of a building is 0.072 kilometers. We wouldn't use kilometers for the height of a building. We'd probably use meters. So we're going to divide by 1,000 here. Again, use that chart to help you if you forget. But remember, there are 1,000 meters in a kilometer, so that's why we're dividing by 1,000. Oh, sorry, we're not dividing, we're multiplying. We're going to a smaller unit. And so remember, if there's 3 zeros there, that's simply moving the decimal place 3 spots. That makes a lot more sense. The building is 72 meters tall. Okay. I forgot to use the arrows here. So when you're dividing by a power of 10, all that's doing is shifting the decimal place back that many numbers. So when we divided by 100,000 here with 5 zeros, it just moved the decimal place back 5 spots. When we divided by 100, it moved the decimal place back 2 spots. Okay.